I was halfway through my third lukewarm coffee when the CEO took the stage and casually nuked a decade of my loyalty with a single smirk. "Let's give a round of applause for our real employees," he chuckled. "And hey, big thanks to the 1,099s who keep the snacks stocked and the wheels turning." The whole room laughed. My stomach didn't. I'd been sitting at that same desk for 10 years. Same Monday meetings, same pre-approved hours, same damn payroll calendar. Just without the health insurance, the sick days, or the respect. He scanned the crowd like a stand-up comic on autopilot, then locked eyes with me. That smug corporate smile widened like he'd just found a bug under his shoe. "Especially you, Melissa," he said. "Our longest-running contractor. Basically part of the furniture, huh?" Everyone laughed again. I didn't. That was the moment. Not when they denied my PTO request during my mother's chemo. Not when they told me onboarding was too expensive for folks like me. Not even when I trained a new hire who ended up being my supervisor. No, this was it. I felt something twist in my ribs, slow and cold. Something broke loose and settled where my pride used to live. Because I'd put up with it all. I thought I was being smart. Strategic. If I stayed long enough, maybe they'd convert me. Make it official. But no. I was a punchline now. A convenient 1099 prop they could parade around and toss aside. And I know what you're thinking. Most people would have just swallowed it. Shrugged it off. 97% do. But if you're one of the rare ones, if you're not afraid to make noise, to ask questions, to claw your name back from the silence, they don't forget that. They never do. So if you're part of that 3%, hit like, drop a sub, and stay with me. Because it gets real. After that meeting, I smiled. Not at the joke. At the storm I felt brewing behind my teeth. I nodded at the interns. Laughed at the executive assistant's fake wheeze. Then I went back to my little corner of purgatory and quietly started what I should have done years ago. I opened my personal folder. Thank God I'd saved everything on a private drive. Screenshots of Slack messages where I was told I had to work 9 to 5. Email chains where I got scolded for missing an employee-only meeting. Pictures from the damn Christmas party, where I was the one passing out branded hoodies. I had evidence. A mountain of it. And I was tired of waiting for someone else to notice. The CEO's words echoed like static in my ears. Just a 1099. Not even a name. Just a number. They wanted a contractor? Fine. They were about to learn what that actually meant, especially when you mess with the wrong one. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't text my sister or scream into a wine glass like some bad Netflix script. I went home, made a grilled cheese, fed my cat, and opened my laptop like I was logging in for overtime. But this time, I wasn't clocking hours. I was inventorying betrayal. Folder by folder. Message by message. Every passive-aggressive memo. Every Slack ping that said, "Don't forget, you're expected on site this Saturday." Every company-wide email that called us a family, while I sat uninsured and one paycheck away from sleeping in my Honda. I wasn't doing this for some courtroom sob story. I just needed the truth in writing. The facts. They always played the plausible deniability card. "Oh, Melissa? She's freelance. She can come and go as she pleases." Bullshit. Try telling that to the junior marketing associate who screamed at me for not joining the Monday stand-up on time. Or the HR rep who accidentally CC'd me on an email about holiday party budget cuts, where I was listed under internal staff. I had receipts. Literal ones, too. Travel reimbursements labeled internal project support. That's not how you treat a vendor. That's how you treat a ghost employee. There was one file I hadn't opened in years. An old PDF from my first month. Back when the company was a scrappy startup and the COO still answered his own emails. It was a welcome doc. Sloppy formatting, bad grammar, all charm. But smack in the middle was the phrase that froze me. "We're thrilled to have Melissa join us full-time. She'll be our rock through this next growth phase." I read it twice. 3 times. Full-time. Their words. Not mine. So I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. I'd been slowly gaslit out of my own reality. 10 years of verbal contracts, unspoken rules, and invisible fences. I'd convinced myself that maybe I misunderstood. That maybe being just a 1099 was my choice. But no. They knew. They always knew. And I wasn't alone. I remembered a conversation with Jamal, the IT contractor. He once joked that he couldn't get the flu because he couldn't afford to miss a day. Then there was Priya, who trained half the onboarding team and still had to chase down payments like a damn bounty hunter. Emily in events? She got a stern warning for missing a company retreat because her freelancer status didn't come with paid travel, but they still expected her to run check-in. It wasn't just me. We were a pattern, a strategy, a cost-saving scheme disguised as flexibility. The deeper I dug, the colder I got. This wasn't about fairness anymore. It was about precision. A quiet, surgical act of accounting for every lie they told, and every dollar they saved by keeping us just outside the firewall. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet. But something had shifted. Not rage. Not vengeance. Just the steady grip of delayed justice curling around my spine. They wanted to call me a number? Fine. I was about to become a line item on their audit report. It was just a checkbox. I stared at it longer than I should have, like it might grow teeth and bite me through the screen. Do you believe you were misclassified as an independent contractor? There were no fireworks, no dramatic legal jargon. Just a bland little square on a state labor board website, surrounded by dry government fonts and Helvetica indifference. But I swear to God, clicking it felt louder than any scream I'd swallowed over the past 10 years. Yes. Yes, I do. The rest was almost insultingly easy. Fill in name, company, dates of work, describe duties, upload supporting documents. I didn't even need to hire a lawyer or speak to a soul. I attached screenshots, the onboarding email calling me full-time, calendar exports with mandated daily hours, Slack messages that opened with "you're expected" and closed with "company compliance." A digital quilt of quiet coercion. Then I hit print. Signed the form in the same handwriting I used to write birthday cards for co-workers who never bothered to learn if I had kids, slid it into a cheap envelope, and drove to the post office. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. The man behind the counter barely looked up. To him, it was just another envelope. To me, it was a landmine. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jamal. Not Emily. Not even my best friend, who still thought I was lucky to have such a flexible freelance gig. I just went back to work Monday morning like I always did. Smiled during meetings. Took notes. Sent recap emails. I was invisible again, but this time by choice. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. There was no fantasy of revenge. No imaginary courtroom where I took the stand and made the CEO cry. Just a strange, calm satisfaction, like finally tightening a bolt that had been loose and rattling for a decade. And then I waited. I waited while they cracked jokes at my expense during team lunches. Waited as they asked me to cover for 2 new hires because you've got the historical knowledge. Waited as I RSVP'd to the same company picnic I wasn't technically invited to because HR wasn't sure what list I belonged on. The days passed like slow-dripping molasses. But I didn't flinch. Because I'd finally done something they couldn't delete, unhear, or reroute through middle management. The form was in the system now. A box was checked. And a timer had started ticking they couldn't hear yet, but I could. It landed on a Tuesday. Beige envelope. State seal. The kind of thing that usually gets rerouted straight to legal, but this one had attention. HR compliance officer, printed right on the front. I saw it hit Marla's desk like a paperweight from hell. She read it, blinked once, then slipped it under a file, and went back to pretending it didn't exist. Classic. By Thursday, it was still buried. HR was good at 3 things: onboarding webinars, passive-aggressive check-in meetings, and ignoring anything that might cost the company money. So they did what they always did, nothing. But Friday, the CEO caught wind of it. He was pacing outside the glass conference room, holding the letter like it was a party invitation to his own firing. "They'll drop it," he said, loud enough for the exec suite to hear. "It's just a contractor whining. Probably doesn't even understand what a 1099 means." Then he laughed, that tight, ugly laugh that always came out when he was scared but didn't want to look it. "They think we owe them benefits now? Please. We've had contractors since day one. It's how startups run lean." That's when I knew he hadn't read the attachments. Or if he had, He didn't understand what they meant. He didn't see the part about classification audits, about retroactive penalties, about co-employment findings. He just saw my name and thought it was noise. But I wasn't making noise. I was building a case. And while he postured and scoffed and moved on with his day, something started happening that he couldn't see, but I could. Slack pings. Quiet knocks on my cubicle wall. The kinds of messages that begin with, "Hey, off the record." First was Brian from Product. He'd been contracting for 6 years. Fixed hours. One client. Branded hoodie and everything. Then Priya from Events came next. She looked like she'd seen a ghost when she whispered, "Did you really send that letter?" I didn't confirm. I just met her eyes and shrugged. She nodded. "Good," she said. "It's about time." But the one that stuck with me was Casey, brand new, maybe 22. Bright-eyed, still said, "Yes ma'am," like she hadn't been crushed yet. She sat beside me one afternoon and slid her phone under the divider. "This is my calendar," she said quietly. Every single day was blocked with color-coded shifts. 9 to 6, mandatory lunch check-ins, even weekly one-on-ones. "They told me it's flexible," she said. "But when I took a half day last week, I got a warning email from HR. Is that normal?" I looked at the screen. Bright colors. Tight boxes. A mirror of my own digital life. No, Gasei. That's not normal. It's employment. And they've been dressing it up in gig economy drag for years. I didn't say much. Just gave her a look and said, "Save it. Back it up. Everything." She nodded like she'd just been told where the fire exit was in a burning building. That weekend, I updated my file. Added names. Timelines. Patterns. Because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was a web. And the threads were tightening. Every ignored envelope. Every scoffed response. Every new message whispering, "Me too." They still hadn't responded to the letter. But the walls? They'd already started to crack. It hit harder than the first. Different envelope this time. Red stamped, flagged for immediate response. Legal boilerplate wrapped around a quiet threat. Failure to comply may result in civil penalties, back pay assessments, and potential tax violations pending investigation. There it was in black and white. The state wasn't asking anymore. They were telling. HR couldn't bury this one. Marla looked pale when she walked it into legal, holding it like it might explode. 30 minutes later, the door to the executive wing shut, and didn't open for 3 hours. When it finally did, people weren't talking. They were typing. Fussed. Angry. Panicked. A memo went out about compliance alignment and operational classifications, the corporate version of "oh shit." By lunchtime, the COO was in full spin. "Wait." I heard him snap outside the kitchenette. "Who else did we 1099?" No one answered. Because no one really knew. That's the problem when your business model is built on blurred lines and plausible deniability. You can't track the lies once they start breeding. By mid-afternoon, people were pinging me I hadn't spoken to in years. Kevin from Design, who left back in 2019. "Hey random, did you kick this off?" I got a weird call from legal. Then Rachel from Operations, who once shared a lift with me to a trade show we weren't officially invited to. "Did you send something in?" Because my old boss just asked if I'd been approached. Even Derek, the guy who used to mock me for being the only contractor dumb enough to stay that long, messaged, "Tell me you filed. Please tell me you did." I didn't respond to any of them. But I knew then what legal was starting to realize. This wasn't isolated. This wasn't me being disgruntled. This was systemic. A rotted scaffolding holding up their whole cheap empire. And now, every freelancer who ever trained an intern, every independent who had to submit PTO requests, every ghost employee who got a company t-shirt but not a W-2, they were all remembering. All waking up. I stayed late that night, not working. Watching. The energy shifted. Doors shut quieter. People whispered louder. You could feel the floor pulsing with nervous energy. They thought this would be a slap on the wrist. A minor inconvenience. But now they were scrambling. Because the state was asking for documentation. Proof of contracts. Classification rationale. Training logs. And HR had none. Because it never existed. We were never supposed to last long enough to notice. I updated my spreadsheet, added names as they came in, cross-referenced years and departments. Marketing, product ops, sales support, client onboarding. 17 people. 17 workers listed as 1,099s who'd done full-time work under full-time hours with full-time expectations. 17 names they thought were disposable. But now we had one thing they never expected. Each other. They didn't send another letter this time. They sent people. 3 of them with badges, clipboards, and the kind of calm you only see in folks who already know they've got you cornered. They showed up on a gray Wednesday morning, walked straight through the front doors, and requested access to conference room C. Not asked, requested, like it was already theirs. No warning, no pending review. The audit had begun, and they were doing it old school. By 9:13 a.m., legal was rattled. By 10 o'clock, the auditors had already requested timesheets, project logs, onboarding forms, and training schedules. By 10:30, someone from payroll threw up in the third-floor restroom. I sat at my desk, quietly sipping coffee while everyone else flailed like fish dumped from a bucket. The CEO tried to play alpha during the initial meeting, some hand-waving about how they'd cooperated with similar reviews before, and were happy to support transparency. One of the auditors, a middle-aged woman with half-moon glasses and no visible tolerance for bullshit, just nodded. Then she said flatly, "That's fine. We'll subpoena." I swear you could feel the oxygen leave the room. Because here's what nobody upstairs seemed to understand. When the government sends people, not paper, it means the timeline for mercy has expired. Now it's about documentation, proof, precedent. And these auditors weren't here to be charmed by mission statements or startup culture. They wanted receipts. Literal ones. By noon, word had spread. Nobody knew who started it. Everyone had a theory. I kept my mouth shut, but the sideways glances started stacking up like unpaid invoices. One exec, Eric from Strategy, got overheard during a Zoom call throwing marketing under the bus. "We only use contractors in that department," he insisted. I was told they were handled properly. The head of marketing, whose office was 4 feet away, slammed her door so hard a picture fell off the wall. It was unraveling. And still, they hadn't figured it out. But I had. Around 3:40 p.m., one of the auditors quietly handed me a file. No preamble. No warning. Just placed it on my desk and said, "You have a right to see this." Then she walked away. It was a copy of the formal complaint. My name was listed first. Not buried in a list. Not part of a cluster. First. Bolded. I read every word. Heart hammering so loud I could barely hear the office noise around me. The language was clinical, no drama, just facts. Misclassification indicators. Documentation trails. Control over scheduling. Requirement of fixed work location. Lack of payment flexibility. All of it. Laid out like an autopsy. Not just for me, for all 17 of us. And that was the turning point. That was when I knew this wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't a pebble I threw in a pond. This was a boulder dropped in the middle of a cracked dam. The water was already rushing in. Fast. Loud. Unstoppable. They'd ignored the envelope. Laughed at the warning. Brushed off the panic. Now they were staring down the full weight of a state audit. And there was no one left to hide behind. Except each other. They just couldn't help themselves. That's the thing about people like him. The ones who've never faced real accountability. They don't know when to stop swinging. Even when their hands are tied behind their back. It started subtle. Monday morning, I couldn't log in. Not to Slack, not to my email, not even to the stupid dashboard where we tracked billable hours for projects I wasn't technically allowed to take credit for. At first, I thought maybe IT had just made a mistake. They'd been overloaded, running around trying to scrape together audit logs no one had bothered maintaining for years. But then I got the text. "Hey, just heard they let you go. What the hell's going on?" It was from someone in sales. Then another from events. Then another from legal. Not a partner, just a paralegal I'd once shared a lift with after a holiday party. "You okay? Heard you got terminated." They're saying it was budget cuts. Except there was one small problem. I hadn't been employed. Not officially. No contract terminated. No pink slip. No exit interview. Just silence. My credentials were revoked, and a story started spreading like office wildfire. I'd been dismissed for creating disruption. The narrative was cute, palatable. Made me the villain without needing evidence. Just a whisper campaign like the ones they used on other contractors who dared ask why they didn't get benefits despite working 45 hours a week. But this time the wrong person heard it. The labor board. And unlike me, they didn't shrug. The retaliation notice hit like a second detonation. Apparently, the state has rules, real ones, about punishing someone for filing a claim. Especially when that punishment comes with systemic intent. Access revocation prior to formal review indicates retaliatory action. Their words, not mine. And since I wasn't officially an employee, the act of cutting off access while simultaneously letting the rumor mill suggest termination? That made it worse. A lot worse. They sent a notice back. Not a polite one. This one-sided case law mentioned punitive fines. Said the word escalation 5 times. And here's the part that really lit the fire. Once retaliation is confirmed, the misclassification is no longer considered accidental. It becomes intentional. And that triples the penalties. I heard from someone in compliance that when the CEO got the notice, he ripped it in half in front of the exec team. Not metaphorically. Literally. Tore it down the center, then tossed it at the general counsel and walked out. They'd poked the bear, and the bear brought lawyers. By Thursday, the company's outside counsel was asking to speak to me informally. I declined. Politely. Through the board. Because now, I had representation too. The firm assigned me a case manager. They explained how the burden of proof had shifted. How this wasn't about me anymore. It was about precedent. About sending a message to every other company cutting corners and hiding behind the word contractor. Their arrogance lit the fuse. Now they couldn't put the fire out. I wasn't in the building anymore, but my name sure was. On whiteboards. In emails. In board meeting minutes where someone wrote, Melissa/1099 situation. Escalating. I could have told them that weeks ago. But now? Now they'd learn it the hard way. They called an emergency meeting at 7:30 a.m. Not because they cared about convenience, but because panic doesn't sleep. I wasn't supposed to be there, technically. But someone from legal, maybe out of guilt or just morbid curiosity, made sure I was CC'd on the calendar invite. Open attendance for named parties. That was all I needed. I showed up early. Sat in the back. No laptop, no notepad. Just me, a cup of burnt breakroom coffee. And a silence I wore like armor. When the general counsel walked in, you could smell the tension souring the air. Half the executive team looked like they'd aged 10 years in a week. The COO didn't even sit, just paced behind the chairs, chewing the edge of his thumbnail. The CEO leaned back with his arms crossed, like he was auditioning for denial, until the lawyer opened the manila envelope. No one breathed. She started reading. The Department of Labor has completed its classification audit, and in accordance with Section 530 of the Revenue Act and applicable federal guidelines. Her voice didn't waver. Flat, clinical. But every word felt like a hammer coming down on the bones of a dying animal. Back pay, required. Interest, accrued and non-negotiable. Civil penalties, assessed at 3 times standard due to confirmed retaliatory action. IRS notification filed. And then the quiet grenade. Permission granted to escalate as class action under State Labor Code, Article 12. That's when the COO sat down. I watched the blood drain from the CEO's face. For a moment, I think he genuinely believed he could smirk his way through this. The guy who laughed at me during a town hall, like I was a defective office chair, now looked like someone had replaced his lungs with cement. The lawyer lowered the letter, glanced around the room, and said, flat as the carpet, "You just bankrupted us." No one said a word. No dramatic outbursts. No screaming. Just a stunned silence that stretched so thick it felt like a second ceiling had dropped over the room. I kept my face blank, but inside, it wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't even revenge. It was confirmation. Confirmation that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't dramatic or overreacting or too sensitive. That all those nights I worked late without overtime. All those meetings I wasn't paid for but was still expected to attend. All those annual reviews I didn't get but somehow still received feedback from. They saw it now. Not because they wanted to, but because the law made them. The CEO didn't speak. Not once. He just stared at the floor, hands clenched on the table like he could hold back the tide if he gripped hard enough. And I sat there in the back, still, steady, watching the very people who told me I didn't belong here finally realize they were never supposed to be in charge. The letter was just paper. But the silence that followed? That was the sound of everything changing. The headline broke on a Thursday. Tech firm fined $8.6 million over contractor misclassification. Front page of the business section. A full-color photo of the downtown office, door chained, lights off. Subheadline. 2 locations to close. Executives under review. I didn't gloat. Didn't share it on LinkedIn. Just bookmarked the article, exhaled, and let the weight settle. It wasn't about the money. Though the check did come. Settlement plus statutory damages, processed through a courier like they were too ashamed to put it in the mail. I opened the envelope slow, like it might vanish if I blinked. 6 figures. Neat. Clean. No apology note, no acknowledgement. Just a payment for 10 years of being told I didn't count. I didn't cash it right away. Instead, I took that last $10.99 they ever sent me, creased, coffee-stained, printed with the same indifference they always treated me with, and had it framed, hung it above my desk at the new job. A real one. Vdva. Benefits from day one. My name on the org chart in ink. Clients walk by and ask why I've got a tax form on the wall. I smile, offer them coffee and say, that's the reason I work the way I do. No speech. No fireworks. Just the quiet knowledge that I survived a system that was never meant to keep me, and turned it inside out. The old company's social channels went dark. The execs scattered, some to consulting, some to radio silence. The CEO resigned, to pursue personal interests. I don't know where he ended up, and I don't care. Closure doesn't always come with confrontation. Sometimes it comes in the form of a final deposit, and the sound of a phone that doesn't ring anymore. Except today it did. Buzzed once on my desk. Unknown number. You don't know me, but I think I was misclassified too. I heard what you did. Can you help me? I looked at the frame $10.99, then at the unopened folder on my desktop. Its title? $10.99 Playbook. I clicked it open. No rage. No heat. Just purpose.